a Dredfunn original production. Please sit back and enjoy.
Alright, Dredfunn back, and it's time to ink. Basically, I'm going to be using, I've got myself some waterproof Indian ink. I sort of keep it in a little container. This will be the brush I'm using. It's a Simmons fine liner. It's so old that all the stuff is worn off, but I'll be using that, as well as these two Micron waterproof ink pens. They are pigment black, and I'm using a 05 and a 01. We're using this mostly to outline everything, and then this one to detail. So as I did before, I'm actually going to zoom in for much of this. To start off, when inking, like I said, I tend to leave my pencils loose so I can go ahead and add stuff while I ink. So for this, I'm just gonna sort of add the line here, and there we go. I'm gonna go with the cape first, just because it's something that I'll be able to show you guys without zooming in. I don't really worry too much about making the lines too thick, because when I add the ink, technically I guess I ink the drawing twice. Certain areas I will add more black, less black, and then I will actually bold up some of the lines depending on how I feel and how the drawing looks. With this one, I won't be doing too much. With this ink, I'll just be darkening everything. So we're going to start with that left arm again. Sorry, the right arm, I guess, technically. I'm going to basically, like I said, I use this to outline where I'm going to have the lines. I don't worry too much, because again, I'm going to sort of focus on adding detail and sort of texture with the ink. I also do a style where I tend to go in and add gray tones with a mixture of ink and water. If you've watched any of my videos, you've probably seen that. But with this one, like I said, we're not going to do that. This is my first time, so I'm going to keep it kind of simple. So yeah, with these, I'm just sort of detailing where I'm going to blacken everything and how I'm going to make it look. This is where I prefer to do a lot of my fine lining and filling and fleshing out the character. It's a style that I've developed over many years, and that's something I will suggest. You can try to emulate many of the people that you like, artists that inspire you, especially artists in the comic book genre, or even go outside of that. Me, I'm a big fan of Leonardo da Vinci, so I check out some of his stuff. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually show you guys how I hatch. Normally I will outline the whole drawing and then go in and hatch it, but just to save time and to make it a little more streamlined, we're going to hatch it as we go. With the finer line pen, this is much thinner. The tip is much thinner. I like to do any of the veins that I'm going to add in. Sometimes I'll do the veins first, but for this, because it is a costume, technically the veins shouldn't be really showing, but hey, we're doing a comic book. Another thing you might want to do is you can bring in a sheet of paper, sort of blocking the smudging. I am going to do that a little bit, even though I usually only do that with my realistic pencils. Now, when hatching, you'll see I like to keep the lines nice and tight, go one way, and then sort of just go slightly the other way. I don't really go cross back and forth at 90-degree angles. Some people do. It's not a way I like to do it. Usually I want to keep the ones that are tight here going this way, and then I come back with a sort of a sweeping hatch, if you will. Again, folks, if I haven't mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. I am not a classically trained artist in any way. Believe it or not, I failed art in high school. Not once, but twice. A lot of it really didn't have anything to do with my ability to draw. It had more to do with my ability to, basically buckle down and do what I needed to do. I was very stubborn. I've always had a hard time being a bit of an oppositional type person. Part of my character trait, not that we're going to get too deep into it. Again, like I said, this drawing is small. It's on an 8.5 by 11, so really can't go into too much detail, but we're going to do the torso next. And I'll leave enough room so I can show you guys how I do the belt and everything. Again, we're going to switch back to the thicker pen line. Like I said, I prefer it. Anytime I go in and do the hatching or veins, if this drawing were bigger, I might go with bigger pens, but probably not. I probably would just use this one. You can get a wide variety. You can get brush style pens in this style. There's a bunch of other different companies. I mean, you can do this with a brush. You can do this style with a quill. Part of me would love to learn how to use a quill. I've tried it in the past, but I get so stubborn and I have such a hard time with it that I usually get frustrated and give it up. Maybe now in my calmer years I might be able to get away with it, so who knows. Never say never. So yeah, we're gonna, like I said, I'm detailing the bat symbol now. I like to keep my strokes smooth. You got to keep in mind too, like you can only go so far with your wrist and your fingers. You can only bend so far. So I like to keep that in mind when doing my strokes. It also helps me limit how big I'm going to make the drawing, so or what kind of approach I'm going to take. If it sounds like I'm babbling, chances are I am. This is, again, the first time I've tried this. So, like I said, we're doing the abs here. I like to sort of just leave a rough idea where I'm highlighting the muscle. If this were a real cloth-like suit, you wouldn't see none of this. You've seen it with Adam West and some of the older Batman prior to the latex sort of suits that we have now that you can make your actor look much bigger and imposing. So, like I said, I use this as the reference, if you're recalling. I don't know if you can see that there, but I already know where everything's going to go, so that reference kind of is done. I've seen the drawing in my head. I've done this so many times that it becomes second nature, and that's something that I would suggest, put serious thought into that. If you want to become good at anything in life, you really do have to spend time getting good at it. Even if you're making mistakes, a lot of the skills that I've developed over the years are from making mistakes. As I said, I was very stubborn and I wanted to do things my way. That's why I had a hard time in art class and a lot of other classes as a kid. Even to this day, I catch myself doing it too. So I'm always trying to focus on that. Again, same thing I do over here. Like I said, I like to keep the hatching going one direction and then come across in the other direction. In my time-lapse videos, it's kind of hard to see because it goes by so fast. You sort of just see a blip. Now in this area, I'm actually going to hatch the whole thing, the whole side of the muscle, and then I'm going to switch it up and come back and cross-hatch only parts of it. As I said, this part's going to be black, that part's going to be black. Sort of follow each muscle. I mean, you can, if this was an action shot, I'd be conscious of how the muscles might move and the shading, but this is just your standard heroic pose. So we got that detailed. I'm going to go down now and we're going to do the legs and the lower part. Again, I might take a lot more time if I were doing this as a time-lapse drawing instead of doing this as a how-to. But since we're not, time is of the essence. So again, I switched back to my pen, my thicker line pen. A lot of these lines, as you'll see, when I switch to my brush, I'm just going to go over again. You can make the boots super tight, almost like they're part of his foot, or you can go with the approach where you make them more clunky and thick, more like a combat boot. I like to go with something a little in between. As I already stated in the first video, I'm going to make the boots black, so we're just highlighting sort of the outline, the outside line. You can see roughly here where I'm going to darken everything. Like I said, I do loose pencils, so you can see I'm not really focusing like when I did the pencil exactly how it's going to look. I've got a rough idea in my mind. I'm now just sort of filling it out. Again, the benefits of inking your own pencils. Something that I'm seeing a lot more in the comic book field. A lot of the people that I enjoy tend to do that. Something that wasn't quite as common back in the day, or at least back in the olden days. Nowadays, with computers and stuff like that, I mean, you can do this kind of stuff with a digital approach. Me, I've always preferred pen and paper. It's just the way I like to roll. So again, we're just lining out everything. Really just focusing on what I'm going to blacken it out. You'll see when we start adding my waterproof ink how everything sort of comes together. You know, I watch a lot of artists and a lot of time-lapse artists on YouTube and other areas, other video things like Dailymotion and stuff. And it's neat to look at people's approach. And it's hard to do this kind of video because, you know, like I said, I don't generally talk when I'm drawing. But we're giving it a shot. And I'm a big fan of a lot of time-lapse art. And a lot of art in general, especially if it's been filmed. You know, good old classic Bob Ross and his Happy Clouds. So again, we're just going with the hatching. Like I said, I'm keeping everything on this side because, again, the light's coming that way. If I were painting this, I would paint it right after I'm done with the pens. And then I would do a final ink with the waterproof ink that I have off to the side of my brush. Because a lot of these lines will not stand out. They won't pop when you apply the watercolor paint that I use. Something that, in general, not a lot of people use. Especially in the comic book field. Now, most times, the coloring is done digitally. And while that's cool and I like it, I would love to have some of my stuff digitally colored. Really like the way it looks. For me, I've never been able to master that kind of digital work, or any digital work. I've done a little bit, but it's very amateurish, not up to snuff with my penciling and inking ability, I think. And you know, because I've done kids' books where, you know, it's like a single cell color, and I don't have to worry too much about. Basically, they're like modern day painters, to be honest. So here we go. I've done the hatching. I'm now going to go in and we're going to do the other arm, and then I'm going to finish up with the head, and then we're going to do the final inking, hopefully. It's not taking us too long. We're now into around the 15-minute mark. I'd like to keep this around 20, but here we go. Again, I'm back to the thicker pen because, like I said, I like to use it. It's just it's got a smoother feel. It's got a much thicker tip, almost like a marker. As I said, if you've got the benefit of knowing how to use quills and the ink, go for it. I would definitely. Like I said, I've tried it in the past, and just I don't know if it's because I got big mitts or I'm kind of like a heavy-handed fella. In regular life, kind of klutzy in a lot of ways. Not a delicate flower, this guy. So I don't know if maybe that's why it doesn't work out so well with the quill. Alright, again, this arm is going to be cast in quite a bit more shadow. You saw with that maquette character in the other video, as well as I tried to show it to you briefly there in this one. It's definitely going to have more of it cast in shadow, so I'm really focusing on darkening those areas. And again, we're going to take the smaller pen, and I'm going to go in and add my hatching down and around the knuckles. I don't get too detailed. Generally, comic book artists will draw their images on 11 by 17 paper. This is 9 by 12, so quite a bit smaller. The bigger you go, the more detailed you can go. But if to be honest, I mean, this would be the size of a good size page or a good size image on an 11 by 17. So it's a good practice go. As I said, with this hatching, you can omit this when you're doing this at home. You don't have to do it. You can just go with what you want. You can use mine as a basis and take of it what you want and get rid of what you don't need or what you don't like and what doesn't work. But like I said, for me personally, mistakes are a blessing. Anytime I've made a mistake, it's something that I've learned from, and it's made me a better artist. Is it fun to do at the time? No. Is it frustrating? Yeah. To the point of, maybe causing a few psychoses, I guess so. I've had my issues. So here we go. I'm going to, again, back to the thicker pen. With the cape, with Batman's cape, it kind of comes up and over the shoulder. I said I will switch to my thinner pen once I get this outlined. You got his thick trapezius neck. Like I said, when we were penciling in this video, when it comes to real life human proportions, the comic book world doesn't really have that. Everything's very, very well stretched out and larger than life. It translates better. It makes the comic books, or at least the comic book images, much sharper. So here, yeah, I'm going with the classic triangular eyes. Batman has triangles over a lot of his face. His nose sort of comes into a triangle as well. I've switched to the thinner pen just so I can get nice detail in there. I'm going to make a nice cleft in the chin. Make sure his jawline is nice and thick. Very square jaw. That's the classic way to go with comic book characters. If you were going to make like Alex Ross, who's a painter that does comic book images, I mean, he uses actual real life, I don't know, people, but I guess models and actors and stuff to wear costumes, and he uses them as the basis for his images. I mean, if you could afford the time and had the resources, that would be awesome. Me, I usually, like I said, I'll look for something online that I like, or if I've got something in my head that I've drawn or that I know what I'm going to do, I'll basically go with that. With this one, like I said, we went with a little maquette drawing that you've seen in the first video. So, just like the arm down here, the light's coming in this side, so we are just sort of lightly dousing everything. The neck muscles, you can get all veiny and crazy, but again, this is a costume. If this were the Hulk, I'd definitely make everything thicker and you'd have veins and all that good stuff. So again, I'm going to do some single hatching in and around the brow line, up and across the head. Maybe a few over here and on this side. You don't want to clutter it up too much. Like I said, this is just to accentuate. It's to give the idea of shading. That's where that hatching work came from. Because when you're working with ink, it's not like paint. I can't shade things. You have to use lines, and lines are hatching. So here we go. I'm just sort of giving him his stubble. And any of the single hatching that I want to do in here, again, you don't want to do too much. The smaller the drawing gets, the less you can add. So that seems to be nice. I'm going to add a little line there to accentuate the skull line, and then we're going to add some hatching down under the jaw. Not much, just a little bit. And then we're going to switch to my brush pen. But before we do that, I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to actually erase much of the pencil lead so we get a nice tight drawing. You can do this afterwards or before. You know what? I might just do it now. Be done with it. You know what? Forget it. So yeah, you just take your eraser, sort of clear up some of these pencil lines. You know, a lot of artists, you know, especially comic book artists, would say, oh no, don't do this. They'll use blue pencils and different other techniques. Again, if you're coming from the background where you've got traditional training, go with it. But I have more of a guerrilla style approach. I go with what works. And so here we are. We're going to switch to a brush. Like I said, I like to add highlights. Not highlights, but I like to outline certain areas, and that's what we're going to do here. Problem with using a brush is you got to go back again and again and again to dip, but it is what it is, and I don't mind. Like I said, much of this drawing isn't going to have these lines. You know, in this case, if I weren't filming and this was just something for fun, I might actually turn the page around and switch things up a bit. But we're not going to do that with this one. So yeah, one thing you want to be careful with when you're using a brush and ink is drops. You don't want any of your ink dropping down and ruining the drawing or the image. So I'm always conscious of that. I don't want to fill my brush up too much, but I definitely want it to have enough. And that's why we're going to switch over here and going to start outlining and inking this shoulder area. Because much like with the smudging, you want to be conscious. Nothing worse than doing all this nice detail work, and then you put a bit of ink down, and then you smudge it with your hand, and it just ruins everything. So yeah, I've got in my eye where exactly everything's going to be blacked out. With Batman, the good thing is, you know, a lot of times you don't have to have these little lines like right in there where it breaks the color. You can let the black sort of flow into the black, like right here where I'm going to do this with his knuckles in his hand. Again, I am trying to be speedy, so this isn't the best of my ability, but you know what? It gives people a chance to get inside my head for a minute and see what it is that I go through when I'm drawing and painting this stuff out. So here we go. I know where I'm inking everything. You can see when I did the original pencil where things are going to get dark. And in a minute, I'm going to switch to a slightly thicker brush just so I can speed this up. Like I said, you are limited a little bit, but by using a brush, what I'm going to do is you'll see in this area here particularly, I am going to highlight some parts of that line. So I'm going to take this brush and you're going to see right in here. We're going to highlight the back of the arm on that side, and then I'm going to come in and highlight that and bring it there. And I'm going to switch to a slightly thicker brush. Allows me to put more ink on and just cover more distance, more of the area. One thing too though that helps is you don't want to start inking like this area here and then go on to something else while this dries. It will leave sort of a streak line. A lot of comic book artists will use Bristol board. You can use Bristol board. I have used Bristol board to do some of my images, and while I like it, I find if I'm adding any kind of color or even inking, I prefer to use watercolored paper. I don't know, I've just used it over the years. I use it for my pencil drawings. Gives me nice effects. So I am bound by it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So again, I know that most of this area is going to be all blacked. And just making sure I don't mess up too much. Like I said, I can't stress this enough. The benefit of inking your own pencils makes it a much more intimate experience, I find. So there we go. I'm done with that brush. We're going to come back over here and continue inking up on this side, being conscious of going this way. That way you don't mess things up. So this part of the cape, we're going to darken that part. And now I'm going to focus on the leg. Again, because this part's going to be all black, I'm going to leave a little highlight line on the inside of the leg. There we go. Maybe what I'll do too is I'll zoom in when I do the head and the upper torso. If you have any questions and you've hung around for this long, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. You can reach me at www.dredfunn.com. I love answering questions, especially art-related questions. They are why I do this. Like I said, I work with kids a lot at my local Y. I do sports and stuff, but I also teach them a lot of art or art-related stuff, at least stuff that I've learned. And, you know, it's definitely a neat approach. I'm not your traditional artist. Like I said, I'll sound like a broken record, but you can't make too many mistakes. You can make, gotta make them. That's what makes an artist, I find. And if you do this for the love and enjoyment of it, it'll take you as far as you need to go. Alright, so, like I said, inking with this smaller brush, I'm kind of having a hard time keeping the speed up. We're going to zoom in as soon as I get this boot done. And there we go. I said a lot of times you can actually, if you want, you can take this ink, and if you have some skill with it, you can, before you add the darks or the blacks, you can go in and download it, upload it to a computer, and ink it through that way, or many other ways. So here we go. I'm going to go in and ink or darken up the ab area. I said, just for the sake of getting this done, I'm really not focusing too much on making it look perfect, but then again, you know what? A lot of my favorite artists, Michael Magnolia, if I'm saying his name right, he created Hellboy. Love his art. He's got a very loose style, I find, and I really like it. Eric Larson, like I've mentioned before, who inks his own. I'm pretty sure Mike might ink a fair bit of his own work as well. Just to add something to it, I find, especially with if you're coming from a pencil background. And you know what, you can never have too many skills. I remember once I saw Norm Breyfogle painting, and Norm Breyfogle is my favorite all-time Batman artist. I love his Batman back, his Detective Comics run was incredible back in the 90s. So here we go, we're going to ink up the cowl. Again, limited by space. You know what? You don't have a lot of room. Again, I like to highlight the outer line. It just, to me, I like that style. A lot of people use it where they go back over the outline, or sort of the outline of the drawing with black. I even like it when some go ahead and add white I've been seeing that on like trade cards and stuff in some of the comic book forums that I subscribe to. So yeah, here we go. We're just, if you want, before you do this ink part, you can leave those pencils in and then erase it afterwards, just sort of to help you keep track of where you want to darken everything. For me though, I've done it so many times, so often that get used to it. One thing you want to keep in mind when you're using a brush, if you're going to go ahead and ink this part with a brush, you don't want too much ink on the brush because that can really screw up your image. If you're using a quill, you can go in there and get nice and tight. If you're using, I used to use Sharpies, just a simple black indelible marker. I would use that puppy to go in there and darken the lines, and I would go back and forth a million times with it until it got dark enough. A lot of times, even with these images, when I download them or upload them, I will put them in on the computer and then actually darken them myself, because I find that it just adds a bit. Like I said, it's tricky using the brush to go ahead and outline things. I find sometimes it works to my benefit, especially when I want to keep things nice and loose. Alright, we're almost done here. I'm going to pull back and we're going to finish up the leg. There we go. I'm going to switch to that bigger brush to get in here. Just helps. I've got even bigger brushes too that I can use if I've got to darken a large area. Like I said, you don't want streaks. You don't want an uneven distribution of ink. So using too small of a brush can mess things up because it'll take you too long to get it completely finished, and using too big of a brush will really limit your ability to get in there. Like even right here on the cape, if I were doing this on my own, I'd probably actually switch between the two brushes, but for the sake of speed, I'm just going to bang it out with this one. Again, I'm going to blacken this entire boot. There we go. So Batman has always been my preferred superhero. Hulk is my number one, but Batman's my number two. I mean, I really can't narrow it down. So technically, I go Batman 2, Hulk 1, but it's a close one. So yeah, again, just going ahead and blacken these certain areas here, keeping in mind not to add too much ink, just enough to get the areas done. If you want, a lot of people, a lot of inkers or a lot of artists that will ink their own drawings will go ahead and blacken these areas as they go. For me, this is just a preferred method. I find I make less mistakes this way. Mistakes meaning inking something and then smudging the whole thing with my hand, which might even happen in this drawing, and I'll still upload it even if it does happen, just to show you that mistakes can really mess up your day, mess up your drawing too. Alright, so we're wrapping up here, just finishing up the last touches on the leg. As I said, I definitely prefer drawing Batman without the underoos, or the knickers, or whatever you want to call them. I don't like drawing them with those on them. Alright, I'm going to move it down a bit so we can get the arm, and then I'm going to finish this puppy up. Oh yeah, I gotta remember to keep talking. Sorry folks. First ever how-to video, and this one's going way too long. Way too long. But if you've stuck around and you're actually trying to draw this along with me, I appreciate you coming along for the journey. And if you're just listening to this because you like watching people draw, or you're watching this and listening because you like watching and listening to people draw, oh boy, English, my second language. It's actually my only language. Then welcome aboard. I hope this is something that interests you, and getting an inside glimpse at what goes through an artist's mind while he's drawing it. Never done this before. If I were doing this in a time lapse, I would be banging out some tunes, or be listening to, the Joe Rogan podcast, or the 40 and Slip or something. But we ain't doing this for you folks. Alright, so like I said, on this side there's definitely going to be a lot more black. A lot of artists will leave areas to be inked by the inker, and just like I said, use those little X marks, the spot sort of things. And others go in there and make their pencils super tight. I would say experiment with both. I have, and it's just a preference. If I know it's not going to be inked and it's just my own pencil, I will definitely not put as much effort into making the pencil super tight. But if it's just, or vice versa, you guys know what I mean. So anyways, yeah, I'm going to leave certain highlights here so you can see where the gloves are. You don't have to. You know what? Batman's cool enough that you could darken those areas, bring them right tight to the line, and it would look cool too, like I'm doing there on the knuckles. Batman is a creature of the dark. So using lots of blacks, I find, always helps. Maybe we can get this image uploaded and get some of you folks online, and maybe load this up to your coloring programs at home, and you guys can color these up and show me what you did, and we'll find me on Facebook. Like I said, you can reach me at www.dredfunn.com. I sell prints, t-shirts, you can buy some of my books, all kinds of stuff. Plus I have been appearing at fan expos. They're sort of like Comic-Cons and stuff like that. Having a great time doing that. So here we are. We're just finishing up the last of the inks. Then I'm going to sign off, and basically I am done for the day. There we go. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. We're just going to add a little signature to the bottom here. Do it with a pencil, or a pen, sorry. And if you drew this Batman along with me, I would love to see your rendition. Anyways, hope you guys like it. Dredfunn out.
This has been a Dredfunn.com production. Thanks for watching.